Hey, welcome everybody. Matt, good to see you.
Good to see you again for another update here. Absolutely.
Yeah, Q3 update. We've got some special guests with Ryan Hamrick and Katie Vukovic. Nice to see you, folks.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're going to get into some fun security topics and services that are, this isn't pie in the sky security stuff. This is actually tangible. Hey, I can bring this, a partner can bring this to their customer right now, and it's something that they can consume and probably something they're dealing with. But before we get into that, as we always do, please submit the form. The form will get you an entry into a $1,000 dinner with us and your team or your customers. And
we've already done a couple of them now. Yep.
We've done a couple. They've been a great success where I think we've had 2 in Michigan, 1 in New York, and a great partner event where they brought a customer and jointly we all move the ball forward. So that's good stuff. And if you submit a question, your entry for winning goes up 5 times. 5x the value.
That's right.
Excellent.
For those that don't know me, Rob Messmer, I'm the channel chief here at CBTS. I'm so glad you joined us. We do these quarterly to kind of hit on the hot topics from CBTS to you, the trusted advisor, to really make you heroes in front of your customers.
We hope. Hope that's their job. That's right.
Yeah. So Ryan and Katie, for those that don't know you, why don't you start, Katie, and introduce yourself, and then we'll end with Ryan.
Thanks. Katie Vukovic, National Channel Manager for CBTS. I typically am alongside Mark Bennett. So if you know Mark, the other side of Mark. Thanks for having me.
You got it.
And Katie, just real quick, how long you been here?
24 years.
That's right. I've been here 17. So that's a good story we go out and tell on the channel too. It's surprising how long people have been employed here. So
yeah, absolutely. Ryan, why don't you give an update on your role at the company?
Sure. Ryan Hamrick, I manage the Security Consulting Services Group here at CBTS, and my team does security consulting services, assessment work, and managed services and things like that.
Great.
Yeah. Well, I've been with the company for 17 years also.
Oh, it's all right.
What about you,
there
Rob?
you go.
I've been with the company for 15 years.
There you go.
So,
awesome.
good tenure.
And Lance, how long you been here with the company?
14 years.
There you go. There you go.
I'm the winner on this one.
We started when you were 4, so so let's get into it. Let's talk about a couple services. I think we're going to talk about something that is a little it's adjacent to security, but it really kind of goes with the security messaging that a lot of and posture that a lot of our customers are looking to solve.
Yeah, in fact, we want to kind of go over 3 subjects today. We want to talk about the first thing we're going to talk about is Microsoft Backup, right? We're going to talk a little bit about security, our SOC services. And then also patching. Patching is a service that continues to grow as well. So, but let's kind of start off with the Microsoft M365 Backup. That's something that we launched in the channel, actually a company in the channel just about 6 months ago, and we're seeing a big interest in it, a big uptake, a big interest. But I think it's still kind of confusing to people about what is it exactly. Because I think if I've got a M365 or an Office 365 account, it's all being taken care of in the cloud, right? Tell me what it is even, really.
Sure. Yeah, you would think that Microsoft would provide those sort of services, but it is not provided by default for M365 customers. We actually use Commvault's cloud product to perform that sort of backup service. It backs up M365 data, Exchange, Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, all that stuff. And again, like you hinted at, Microsoft doesn't provide that backup service directly as part of the M365 offering. So this is an additional service that we provide to customers.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, so back up a sec.
Yeah.
So virtually every customer has Microsoft, right, in their environment probably. What is the normal kind of off-the-shelf backup policy that Microsoft has for these services? That the customer, whether it's Outlook or another application that they have.
Sure. There's really no significant off-the-shelf backup policy. It's a couple of weeks of data storage or a month of data storage. It's very small. You need this backup solution for when there are issues. You need to restore from backup. Data's been accidentally deleted or maliciously deleted or otherwise encrypted. That's why you need the additional backup services.
And what % of customers out there in the larger customers kind of just run out of the off the shelf?
Surprisingly, almost 90% customers,
the vast majority, have no idea,
run just off the shelf. They don't do additional M365 backup.
So if I'm a trusted advisor, this is something I'm asking, just a very simple question to my customers, saying, "Hey, what's your policy around backing up M365 past the thing that's off the shelf?"
Right.
And you're going to get probably surprising answers back.
Yeah, and an important note to make is you mentioned that it's sort of adjacent to security. I kind of consider backup to be a foundational security control because every company has to have a backup strategy. In the case you might get hit with ransomware or some other major event, you need to have backup. You need to have a restoration process and be able to pull that data back in. So it is really kind of a foundational security control, honestly.
Okay. So, and then you mentioned that Commvault's part of the offering we have to it's a managed service for our customers to kind of back up all of their Microsoft services. So what does that look like?
So we actually manage that Commvault service for you, but we do provide a self-service admin portal. So in the case you need to restore data, you're in control of that capability. And while we will do the initial setup, and we do provide the 24/7 365 support of the whole platform itself, the end user, the client, actually has a lot of control over how that backup policy is set and how restores are done. We can obviously help with that too if they want, but that's the part of the service.
Great.
I mean, some of the use cases people think about, you mentioned ransomware, but even I make a mistake as an employee and delete things that I shouldn't have deleted. Maybe I let somebody go and they delete files that I wasn't aware of before they leave the office. Yeah. There's a lot of things that aren't necessarily cybersecurity that these products can help when I need to get to resources. I need to get to past emails, et cetera, or SharePoint. And isn't there also an e-discovery part of this too, with some of the add-on services that can come with this too? So I can go and search for documents?
Mm-hmm. A little bit. Yeah, not as in-depth as some of the other products that are out there, but there is a little bit of that. As we tie into your 365 tenant, we discover things that need to be backed up that are part of the 365 infrastructure.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit pricing, because I know, in the channel, they want to kind of know what's that look like to a customer. Where are we typically on a pricing?
So we're just under $4 a user. That's for 50 gigs of backup. That includes 50 gigs of backup for every user. There's an extended price if you want to go above and beyond that. There is a setup fee, a one-time setup fee of $920. That's just to get everything up and running, have people ready to go, and get our service going for you. But that's a per-user price that just under $4.
What's the average user use storage-wise?
50 gigs is a pretty good size, honestly. Yeah. Especially if you set the right retention policies and reasons for storing things. Users that generate a lot more PowerPoints, big Word files, they're probably going to use up a little bit more storage because those can be in the megabyte size. And once you start to get to, I've got 200, 300, 400 PowerPoints, you really start to up your storage. But honestly, 50 gigs is a great size for 99% of users
average
out
customer.
There. Yeah.
Isn't that also aggregated across all the users too, though? I was thinking did I hear that?
That's 50 gigs per user.
Oh, it's just per. I thought they are. Okay, my fault.
And that's an important distinction too, because if you try to think that it's an aggregate of 50 gigs, that's not going to be very much for an enterprise.
No, I mean an aggregate. If I've got 100 employees, each with a 50 gig license, we pool all that together. I thought.
Yeah, into one storage.
Into one storage.
Correct.
So we're not limiting somebody to 50 gig.
Right.
I could have 100, Katie could have 50, Rob could have 10, you could have 200. We're aggregating all that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Yep.
Thanks.
And off the shelf, the Microsoft, what it comes with storage-wise, is it typically like 1 gig? What's the average?
That number I don't know off the top of my head. I have to look that one up.
I think it would be interesting for people to know.
It'd be good to know.
Yeah.
I do one last thing, kind of the Microsoft. I want to make sure the channel understands too. We are a CSP, and we're getting more and more CSP business. We're even starting to have people come to us now who have EAs. The EA kind of system with Microsoft is not always the most friendly to people moving licenses up and down. Right. There's a lot of waste in EA we're finding, and so we're seeing companies of 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 employees coming to us and saying, we'd like to actually leave the EA structure and come back into a CSP where they're buying kind of individual groups of licenses. So I want to throw that out in the channel as well, that we're seeing more of that kind of business. So, let's go on to the next subject here. Let's talk a little bit about our SOC services. When we first came in the channel, call it 7 years ago, we didn't sell any of our SOC services. We were doing SOC services for customers, but we hadn't turned that into a channel-friendly kind of offering.
Right.
Talk a little bit. One of the things we're seeing out here. There you go. Katie's got to get in front of that mic. Yeah. One of the things we're seeing out here is that there's a lot of security services in the channel. Some of those security services are kind of canned. You have to use, that particular company's EDR tools or this kind of SIM tools or whatever. One of the things I think that's unique about CBTS is we really build kind of bespoke, custom security services or SOC services when we meet with somebody. So talk a little bit, if you would, about our SOC services and some of the custom things we do there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the standard SOC service is, you've got a security operations center. They're looking at alerts and events from different sources, and they are responding to those things for you. They're sending information to the client to say, we discovered this thing. We did something to help you fix that problem. You may want to track it down a little bit more, right? That's our typical SOC service. Now, the customizations we do for that is, like you mentioned, some vendors are like, well, you have to only use Defender because that's all we can really intake and put information from, or you have to only use SentinelOne. To us, the endpoint software doesn't necessarily matter all that much. We can intake the endpoint information into our SOC service and create alerts and incidents off of it, no matter what it is. Now, we do have preferred solutions that we may present to clients, but we can work within their ecosystem. And we
can we even work with, like, we use Microsoft Sentinel as a SIM, but we also use Palo as a SIM as well.
Correct.
And so we can even work with customers about, even if they've got their own SIM with storage, we can even use some of those things. So we really can build some custom solutions around exactly the tool sets they've got.
Right. And if they don't have a really good endpoint solution, we can help them with that. There's a lot of synergies in the combination between using the Cortex endpoint client and Palo's XIM. A lot of extra controls that we can get on our end. So there's some good things we can do with that if they don't have that. But again, we can work with whatever ecosystem they have.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our partners, this is important because when they start to engage their customer, usually there's some investment that's already been made with some contract or some level of service that's already in place. And with our custom SOC services, they can come in and really have an on-ramp and a starting point that's malleable to the customer to fit their needs. Sometimes that might be, hey, we've got a SOC, a customer might have a SOC team that's 9 to 5, but we can be that catch, after hours.
We do that with a large Fortune 100 company today.
Right.
That's correct.
I think that's SOC. Important for these partners to realize that they can make an impact in their customer's business, starting with a custom solution from CBTS. And then what we typically see is then that grows to other services. Then they start, hey, CBTS is great. Can they help with other things?
Right.
And that's where we can help expand our partner's business.
I think a lot of the engineers on this call understand SOC and how to talk to customers about that. But what about the partners that are on the call? So how do they get into a customer and to start talking about SOC? What questions do they need to ask?
It's a terrific question. There's a lot of different questions you can ask. Do you have some sort of centralized monitoring? Do you have the security staff to support a potential incident that you may have within your organization? Do you have the capabilities to respond to the alerts you're getting from the security tools you have out there today?
Yeah.
If the answers to any of those questions are no, then you probably need some sort of managed SOC. Do you want to continue to or hire people to do that sort of stuff? No? Okay, great. Then we can handle that for you.
I heard a presentation talking about when you're going to meet with a customer, tell me about your SOC. What do you do? How do you respond to those things? And have you guys kept track of your average time to detect, and mean time to detect and mean time to respond? Those are things we keep track of.
It is.
But you go ask a company, do they do those things? It's typically they can't. They don't have the SOC staff to do that.
Yeah, and we report those metrics that you mentioned there, along with number of incidents detected, number of incidents resolved in a month. We report all that monthly.
I want to talk about day two. That was a question I wanted to ask. Because before we prep for this, you were telling me some of the custom things we do, like what's that day two experience. So yeah, go in detail about what that day two experience is like with SOC service.
So yeah, after we get everything all spun up and we've got the service integrated into whatever solution we want to use, where we're going to integrate the information into our managed SOC service, we eyes on glass. We are there looking for things within the organization. We do threat hunting as part of that service as well. So as data comes in, if we're seeing alerts, maybe we're not seeing alerts, we're going to go figure out, is there potential for other sources to be put in to give us a better view into their environment, work with the customer on that. monthly reporting on all the statistics you mentioned, mean time to repair, mean time to detect, mean time to respond. All of those things are all reported as part of that service, along with counts of incidents detected, aggregated, time saved. Those sorts of things are all part of our monthly presentations to our clients.
Okay. Now, one thing that always confused me, you brought it up, I wasn't part of the questions I was going to ask, but what the heck is threat hunting? When you say threat hunting, what do you mean? I always got confused by this.
So a system will give you a certain threat information.
Okay.
So an endpoint detection system will tell you, I've detected this malware or this particular technique or something like that.
Okay.
That's a threat that's already there. Threat hunting is then going into the information, understanding the threats that are out there today that other companies are seeing or that maybe are new threats, and going in the information and see if the organization is vulnerable to that.
Our particular customers' organization. Okay, I got you.
Seeing if that organization is vulnerable to that. And maybe they've had something that happened that they hadn't yet detected. So we can go in and find that new information, diving in with our security experts and looking for threats that aren't otherwise detected by platforms.
Okay, that makes sense. One of the things we were talking about too is the difference between maybe our incident response with if we detect or have to respond to an event, and then what forensics might happen afterwards. Talk a little bit about how we handle those situations, what partners we might use for forensics, those kinds of things.
Sure. Great lead in. Appreciate that. Incident response, we provide incident response as part of our SOC service. If we detect an incident, we can respond, we can provide you with the information, we can perform actions on systems and remediate the issues. Forensics is a bigger thing. We can do forensics, but if you have a widespread infection, if you've got a ransomware event that's going on, what we'll typically do is pull in a partner for that sort of big incident response forensics, because that's a whole nother skill set that we trust our partners to be able to work that for us. Now, as we provide some forensics and some incident response as part of our SOC services, we find it very valuable for our customers to have specialists come in for those ransomware incidents.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Just bring up any other questions for you guys on the SOC side?
Just in terms of implementation timeline, because sometimes the security priorities become very important for customers very quickly. A lot of our partners that are in this space are used to, okay, I've got to install a circuit and do SD-WAN install, and like it can take months to get the service implemented on a multi-site opportunity. What does the on-ramp look like to say, hey, I've got a customer, they're ready, it's a good fit. How long does it take to then turn on our SOC services for a customer?
So that's a question that is dependent upon the sources being put in. Sure. But if they're, if they already have Cortex, if they already have Defender, those are prioritized for us. Those are easier to integrate. If they're already using Sentinel in their environment, really easy for us to integrate. It's like a couple of days worth of time.
So we're talking days, not months, depending on what inputs and tools they have.
Yeah, but even if it's stuff that is other vendors that I didn't mention, we can integrate those within a month.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's important, because a lot of times services that we have in this industry take a while to get to that monthly recurring. This is something that can happen pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly, yes. Yeah. Now there is there's not really a bake-in period for this, but as you grow with a SOC service, as we start to understand your client's business a little bit better, we can customize the reporting, we can customize the detections, and that takes time. But that doesn't stop us from running the service from day one. We already have pre-established playbooks and detection metrics and all that stuff that we can apply to any customer's environment. And they're pretty universal.
That's great.
Now, your team also does a lot of consulting, right? You do NIST compliant, not compliancy, but NIST kind of consulting on how to hit a NIST 2.0 framework, as well as some ZTNA consulting too.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that consulting practice. Again, we weren't planning on it, but I think it's important as you talk about, you get in and know a customer, then we want to continue to advise them, and how can that move into other consulting opportunities too?
Yeah, so what we do around NIST is we use the cybersecurity framework as a measurement of the organization's security program maturity, and that's beneficial to a lot of customers because they may not have thought about their security as a holistic program. It's better to think about it at a program level to make sure that you're not missing any gaps in detection for our SOC services, or you're not missing any important governance or other rules or regulations.
Backup and disaster recovery.
Right,
part of
exactly.
That, right?
That's a big part of
asset
NIST.
management, all these things you guys go through.
All those things, and we measure them based on the NIST standard, and the reason we do that is to make sure that they have something they can go back to figure out why we identified something as a gap. So we will identify gaps within that assessment process, make a list of recommendations on a prioritized roadmap for them. It can be a big thing to undertake to change a security program. Doesn't even matter the level of maturity that they have. So what we have done is come up with that process to develop that 3-year roadmap of here are some things you can do within the first year, maybe leveraging existing technologies, maybe bringing on a partner to handle SOC services or patching, and some of the quick wins they can do in that first year. And then the second year is some of the more mature practices and procedures they may want to do. And then that third year is how do we really mature our program and become a more mature organization. And we've done this for organizations that are small, organizations that are multinational, global, multi-billion-dollar organizations that are very mature. It's important to understand that it doesn't matter the level of maturity. Everybody could use a little bit more.
We've done quite a bit in that channel through your organization so far. But talk about the ZTNA thing too, because the channel, we've been talking about ZTNA and around SASE forever.
Right.
But NIST put out some new guidance, I think, in the last year or so about defining what a mature ZTNA practice is, no matter the tools you're using.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so talk a little bit about...
We actually come up away from ZTNA and look at it overall zero trust infrastructure.
Gotcha.
Where ZTNA references really just the network layer.
Okay.
We want to talk about your data protection. So thinking about zero trust is about controlling access to the particular data sources that you have within your organization and how you determine who needs access at the time of access. NIST has come out with, like you mentioned, standards. NIST 800-207 is the NIST standard for zero trust. And then CISA also has an architecture guideline. NIST actually just came out with a zero trust architecture guideline as well that we're integrating into our process. But it's very similar to our program maturity, where we look at where you are in your zero trust journey and we help you figure out how can you get from here to a more mature posture in zero trust. And we do a 3-year roadmap for that too, because it is not just a plug and play kind of thing. It is a whole journey. And so as part of that process, we give maturity scores for each of those functional areas within the NIST framework. And then again, that roadmap to help them mature.
One of the things, I'm going to go off another tangent. We've been hearing on AI about taking a look at your data, normalizing your data, figuring out who has rights and access to it. I assume maybe that almost is starting to come together then, a question of zero trust and getting your data ready in an AI way. Could that be part of almost some common practices over the next couple of years?
Some of that, yeah. Controlling access to your data in a proper way will keep AI from inappropriately accessing your data or help control that access. Now, we actually have come up with a new offering, it's hot off the press, an AI risk assessment.
Okay.
That is based on the NIST AI risk management framework. So let's talk about the AI solutions you are putting into place or you have in place. Have you met the requirements for controlling access to the data? Are you making sure that there aren't potential vulnerabilities in that AI solution, no matter what, if it's generative AI or if it's a machine learning
system?
Even
if it's Copilot, turning Copilot on, I've got to do this work, right?
Yes, absolutely. Same thing. And we're working on an AI red team assessment for AI solutions where we can go in and actually test against particular vulnerabilities and verify that what you've set as rules within your AI system are actually being followed.
Interesting. Cool. Let's move on to patching.
All right.
It's kind of our last subject here. This is another area that's grown quite a bit for us last year. I think in a lot of ways, I kind of tell the story that patching was traditionally almost janitorial work. It just didn't have the priority in an organization, right? And we run into organizations where we come in and we start to talk to them, we realize, you know, when we ask them about their patching practices, we're seeing success rates of 50, 60%, really kind of not up to today's cybersecurity standards. So talk a little bit about what our patching practice is and what some of the things you've seen from a security perspective around that.
Certainly, yeah. So patching is something that is actually near and dear to my heart, as I lead a team and I am a former penetration tester myself.
Okay.
Unpatched systems are the most easily exploitable systems. There are proof of concept code out there for everything that is a vulnerability. If it is a remote code execution vulnerability or privilege escalation vulnerability, whatever it is, usually there's a patch to fix it or some sort of configuration change. So patching is something that is super, super important for organizations to do. And honestly, it's getting easier. With our managed patching service, you don't have to spend your cycles patching systems. It's not the funnest work. Like you said, it is kind of janitorial in nature, but it does require a certain amount of skill and nuance to be able to understand patching cycles and what's important versus what maybe we deprioritize. And then how can we handle that for an organization?
I think we've got a customer, I heard, that we basically took their success rate from about 65% up to like 97. I think we have a 95% success rate on the SLA.
Right.
And one of the things is John Lloyd, one of our sales engineers here as well, was talking about how part of the success of this is that we actually build a program, a schedule, where we've got windows for everybody's device, whether it's a laptop, whether it's server, whether it's applications, which are some of the things that we do. And so you get into an environment where, I want to patch all these servers, Rob's servers next week, let's say. And I say, Rob, I want to patch those on Saturday. And in a typical environment, Rob's like, I can't do them on Saturday. My daughter's getting married this weekend. And we're like, okay, we'll wait till next month or whatever. We never get around to those things. And so one of the things John was telling me is that we put together a schedule with the business that holds everybody's feet to the fire, that we've got primary, secondary, tertiary windows of when we're going to do those patching. So part of it is solving a people problem and a cultural problem too.
Yeah, exactly that. Patching sometimes requires system downtime. People don't like that. Not all patches do. I want to be very clear. Not all patches require downtime, but some do. And we work with the customer to define those windows, continue to hold them true to those windows. We help work within their change management process to make sure that any change requests that they have to put into play to do the patching are done, and through a change review board if they have that change process in place. And we work through that. And you mentioned servers, laptops, applications. We can do over 350 applications natively out of our solution. We can also patch network devices, which is another thing that a lot of organizations...
Network, you mean routers and switches in someone's network? Okay.
Yeah. Right. And that's another thing that organizations kind of skip sometimes is, well, it's still running and maybe there's not a super critical update, so maybe we don't patch it. That can cause problems down the road. But
part of our consulting too, right, is that there are devices that might be back in your network that are protected enough that even though they need patches or they might be end of service, I think we've heard situations where, no, that's okay. You can keep that in your network because it's behind enough other layers to be able to protect it. But those are things we can help do consulting on and figure out with a customer.
That's right. And an important part of that process is creating an exception, a documented exception for those sorts of solutions. Where you're identifying the risk, documenting the risk, and documenting the exception to that risk. We're going to accept that as an organization. We've got other mitigating controls in place, so we don't necessarily need to patch that Windows 2012 server that's running on a very critical piece of equipment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I've seen where customers' feedback is, they've said, hey, the patching is great. You've gotten us on a schedule. Our success rates are through the roof. But what I also appreciate is you're giving me the best practices on what's acceptable for patching, where before I was kind of breathing my own air, and now I have an expert in CBTS to say, no, this is documented now, and this is okay, and this is what we need to do, and this is what other organizations are doing that are all just part of the service.
Yep, absolutely.
Hey guys, I have a question come in. It says, long-time listener, first-time question asker. On the patching as a service solution, is there a size of client, vertical, type of environment, or key question we should ask to determine if it's a fit? I know these can be sizable opportunities, so I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Size, I don't believe is super relevant to the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we have a minimum kind of size, for our organization, which is about 1,000 to 500 employees.
500,000
knowledge
employees.
worker, as a company.
Yeah.
That's typically where, actually, ironically, we also see these opportunities where it's a big enough organization that they've got left and right hands, maybe not knowing, the security team, not in touch with the network team or the server team or application team. But really any size or any vertical.
I would say literally you walk into any company, 500 employees and above, you should be asking, talk to me a little bit about your patching. You guys have any struggles with your success rates on your laptops, on your servers, even network equipment, applications? Asking that question, you're going to find opportunity a couple times out of 10.
Yeah, and it ends up being a much lower cost solution than having them do it themselves.
Oh yeah, because part of the problem too, right, is you'll say, typical couple thousand employee company. That patching process, to your point, I've got to put somebody relatively educated in that position, but it's not a full-time job. And after a while, then that person wants to move on to different parts of the organization, or maybe I lose that person.
Or they don't want to work at 2 a.m.
Exactly. So
right.
it's something that really frees up those IT resources to do more strategic work, but delivers an SLA. So,
right.
Yep. Anything else you guys have got here? I want to bring up one more thing with Ryan, but any other things?
No, I mean, I'm really excited about these 3 products. They're differentiators for us in the channel.
Yep.
It's not just SD-WAN, SASE, circuits, that sort of thing. It's a It's great. Thank
And
you.
they can start to open up deeper relationships too.
Absolutely.
And we're not going to get rich selling patching, but you come in and help somebody with patching, you help somebody with SOC services, you're going to get to know their business deeper. They're going to open up wider opportunities and places. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess one other thing I would add is, for those partners that are out there, that know us, we overinvest in sales engineering. So don't feel like if you've got an opportunity, we're happy to talk to you and your organization about it before you bring us in to see if it's a fit.
Bring somebody from my team. Get Ryan on the phone with people. We'll get John Lloyd. We got a bunch of people. Yep.
And because some of these can be daunting when you're talking about security with a large organization, but we're here to help navigate that. And again, we'll do it on your time first with you. And if you feel comfortable, then you can bring us in.
Yeah. So one last thing, I want to talk about your podcast. You run our professional services group, right? And you have a peer of yours, Krista Bruner. You guys started a podcast around security a while ago.
We did, yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, because it certainly gained traction internally in our organization, but talk a little bit about that, because we'd love to share it with the folks out there.
The podcast is called the No More Secrets Podcast. You can find it on Podbean. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, a bunch of different services it goes to. Lance helps with that as well. And we put out an episode every couple of weeks. We talk about the latest news stories in security, and then we have generally a topic that we'll touch on. And Chris and I just kind of give our views, our background, and thoughts on those particular topics. It is a little more casual than something like this. We have a little bit of fun with it.
Well, you're supposed to, absolutely.
It is. We're really real about security on it, and we really enjoy doing it.
So, just an example, what was one of the topics maybe that you guys spent some time on? With
CrowdStrike.
Okay.
We spent some time talking about.
There was a CrowdStrike thing.
Yeah. Did you hear about that? I don't know if you heard anything about that. We talked about the CrowdStrike incident and things CrowdStrike did wrong, things CrowdStrike did right, and things that have as they progressed. There was also some drama between Microsoft and Delta.
I did not know that. Okay.
Did not care too much for Microsoft's ability to help them respond and recover from the CrowdStrike incident. So we just talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
Also, hot topics is is it 12 p.m. or is it noon? What do you call it?
Now so I listened to that one. That was not quite as captivating for me personally. I got to tell you,
I was enriched.
Okay, I'm not sure, but all right. But what I love about the podcast too is because this is such an evolving set of technologies.
Yep.
Is I'm always learning some new tidbit that I can take back to a conversation, because that's part of our job is to be relevant in front of our customers too. So you guys do a great job of talking a variety of different topics. So
thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ryan, for taking the time here. Katie, thanks for joining us. It's not the last time. You're going to be up here again. Yep. So get used to it. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Yep. Sure. And thank you to all the partners that joined. And feel free to submit the form, and we'll see who the winner is for Q3 Engineering Update.
Yep. As always, thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.